And I think the biggest thing there is that you're not a failure. If you don't, I think people are so scared of being seen to do the right thing. No, the right thing is being great at your job and being happy at your job, being content. That's the right thing. Like going into a manager role because you've been told that your last 3 quarters have been off the charts and that's your next step. If those aren't your skill sets and you don't have an interest in that, trust me, 6 months later, you'll be burnt out and you'll be out the door.
Preparing yourself for failure.
Yeah, 100%.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of What My Best Friend Does, where we talk about what your best friends do so you don't have to. Today, I'm joined by my best friend, the manager of a customer success team, Jack. Jack, how you doing?
Hello. Yeah, I'm doing all right, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to get into it.
Love it, love it. Great to have you on the show. We like to start with a little icebreaker to warm ourselves up.
Perfect.
What did you want to be growing up?
Oh, yeah, I was desperate to be a professional rugby player, actually, from like a very young age. I think my parents just tried to bash the energy out of me, so gave me a rugby ball, and I would just be out on the field, just literally kicking all day. I was obsessed with it, and then reality took hold, and I did not become a pro.
Okay, so you wanted to be, from the sounds of it, the next Johnny Wilkinson.
100%.
Okay.
100%.
That didn't work itself out. You're now working customer success.
Yeah.
Can you briefly talk us through your journey to this point?
Sure. So, obviously graduated university, and the first thing was get down to London and start making money. I actually studied sports medicine, so something completely, unrelated. And I think, realizing that sport or being a professional athlete wasn't going to be, possible for me. Secondary interest had always been technology. And obviously technology is key to pretty much everything in life right now. And it's an area where you can build a really pretty solid career out of. So came down to London and pretty much went straight into tech. So started in business development as an SDR, so booking those meetings for the AEs, built my way through into sales, and then moved across into customer success. For me, I wanted to do that because I really enjoyed actually working towards achieving the dream. You sell the dream, but actually to be able to create something tangible and work in a longer term relationship with clients, I found very, very rewarding for me. So moved across to CS, and then that's where we've been for however many years now. And now obviously working with yourself.
Yes. Full disclosure, Jack is my current boss. So no pressure on me during this interview.
No pressure on me. If I sound like an idiot, then you're going to leave. So, I've got to get it right.
All right. So that takes us nicely to today. Customer success, how would you define it?
Sure. Look, I think, primarily you've got to obviously be able to define what is of value to the client, okay? And hopefully we've identified that through a sales process, okay? But it's not always clear, or those things can change over time. So one, you've got to define what is of value to the client, and you've got to make sure you deliver against that, and you communicate clearly that you're delivering value against those. But I think outside of that, kind of whatever that KPI is, or that solving that pain point that the customer has, fundamentally, I believe one of the biggest things that customer success, reps have their responsibility is to create a seamless and frictionless experience for the customer. On the front end, they should have a great experience with your business, and we are the glue that usually brings together multiple different departments: billing, finance, support, solutions engineers, product, R&D. And, we know that on the back end, that's not always seamless, right? It can be a little bit messy at times and things can go wrong, but it's about us being accountable, taking ownership, and really providing that seamless experience to the customer, or at least aiming towards that. So that's my version of what customer success would be.
I love that. And how would you say customer success differs from account management?
Sure. Well, I think the industry as a whole has matured a lot over the last probably 10 to 15 years. I think if you went back past that, maybe my timing's a little off, but if you went back past that, customer success didn't really exist. Account management was really it. Someone would sign on, they'd probably hear from their account manager at the 6-month mark, at the 9-month mark, and hopefully sign the contract and renew them. And I think, what we've realized is, SaaS, software as a service, is actually taking that past one step. It's not about contract management. It's about actually helping people get best value out of the service that they have purchased. And so to me, that is the biggest difference between customer success and account management. Account management is making sure that the contract is one, that it's deployed, and two, that you keep that customer loyal. Customer success, and of course, account management can entail upsell, cross-sell, things like that. But for me, customer success is actually how do you deploy that technology to provide the best value according to that brand's requirements and pain points. Pretty key difference, but it's still a pretty immature industry when you think about maybe other areas within technology. And customer success is kind of continuing to evolve.
Yeah, I love that. And, especially within the organization we work in and some other companies, it can be segmented out in different ways. So, for us, we've got SMB, we've got mid-market, and we've got enterprise. How would you say the role differs as you go between the different regions?
Yeah, sure. So, the demands that are placed on a CSM are different by segment. So it's really the demands of the role that change how you need to respond to the requirements, right? So SMB, typically, and again, many of these things are generalizations, so I appreciate if someone challenges it, but fundamentally SMB, typically smaller contract value, typically less complex in terms of a technical deployment and in terms of kind of an ongoing program for optimization. And because of those reasons, a CSM is likely to have a larger book of business, right? They're not going to have the depth of relationship, the depth of technical or strategic requirements placed on them for each account. So that means they work more at scale, and so need to be able to work maybe in a more automated or more cookie cutter manner. That's not to say you want customers to feel like they're just one of many, but it's more the nature of the role. Mid-market, as we shift further kind of up that scale, typically we'll have slightly larger contract values, slightly more complex. Typically you're going to be working with more than one stakeholder within the business. And so again, you think of the level of resources that you need to put in place to support that as an engagement. You're going to have usually a lower number of accounts, and your service model, the amount of time that you're dedicating per client is going to increase. And we then think of kind of maybe the upper end of that being enterprise. We're talking about the largest brands in the world, typically multi-regional. Typically very much larger teams and kind of multi-departmental teams that you need to cultivate and nurture relationships with. And really, as you go up the scale, it's a lot more about project management, okay? And really taking that ownership for that account and really leading and leveraging the resources available to you to give the best result for the customer. So I think those are probably kind of the key top level differences between each of those segments.
You mentioned customer success. You mentioned project management there. As we go between the tiers, would you say that the skills required between SMB versus mid-market and enterprise, they're vastly different, or just a couple of nuanced things as some things get complex?
Yeah, good question. Look, I think they're actually really significantly different. And my opinion is that I think that gets underplayed sometimes, and I don't mean to go off topic at all. This does relate, so hear me out. But I think a lot of the times when we talk about like career development within customer success, it's like, so you'll start in SMB, and then depending on your performance, we'll move you up to mid-market. Then if you're really good at that, we'll move you into enterprise. And enterprise is typically seen as kind of the pinnacle within customer success. You're dealing with the big accounts, and it's really exciting. And it can be exciting to work with the biggest brands, but I think that misses out on a really key element, which is actually there are such different skill sets required for each segment that actually you can be a superstar and work in SMB your whole career because you can have such specialized skill sets and experience within that actually moving from an SMB motion up to enterprise or enterprise to SMB, it's going to be vastly different. And I think we need to start within the industry personally, I think we need to start encouraging people to really lean on their skill sets and actually really build, careers within those segments rather than saying it's all a pyramid up to enterprise. Because actually the reality is most organizations, you can't have everyone moving up into enterprise. Typically you're limited on roles, bandwidth, whatever it is. So I think there are significant differences in SMB. Again, where it's mainly focused on, right, how can you automate? How can you operate at scale? How can you hit outreach across your customers at scale? How do you juggle all of those plates to make sure that no one feels forgotten, right? It may be less about technical skills. It's much more likely to be less about project management. It's going to be, hey, have you got what you needed from technical support? Hey, that particular optimization strategy that I had for you, have you been able to do it yet? It's kind of more of a check-in and holding clients to account within reason. We move upscale, and especially, if we kind of fast forward to enterprise, the project management piece is huge. And, look, like you coming into Yotpo over the last couple of years, you've had perfect experience of it yourself with some pretty large brands where suddenly you have whole dev teams. You then have digital, you have marketing, you have within that, CRM, we have all of these different, stakeholders that you have to bring together. And we have to bring the resources our side. And so, really when you go up market to enterprise, it really is about project management. It's about prioritization. But it's also, because you typically have more resources, it's very easy to think that you need to throw everything at the wall and hope it sticks. And we've talked about it before where, like, if you can really identify that one pain point in enterprise and you relentlessly hit it, you relentlessly go at providing the solution for it, providing value against it, you don't need to implement the whole platform, the whole solution, And I think that can be one of the toughest things with enterprise is actually maintaining focus on that end goal.
And on that note of maintaining focus, this is so strange because you're actually my boss. But obviously you manage a team. What do you deploy to ensure that the people who work under you maintain that focus?
That's a really good question. And I bet, depending on what I say, you're going to call bullshit on it, maybe, because you've got real world experience of it. No, look, I think the first thing is like you have to give clarity of purpose and goal to people. If people don't know what they're shooting at, then how can you achieve it, right? How can you kind of have that initial piece of motivation as to what you're working towards? So I think what's always very key, and some quarters were better than others, but is having that absolute clarity as to what we're shooting for. When we're talking about metrics, KPIs, obviously, typically what we're looking at is net retention rate and logo retention. And those are the key things we're measured by. And I think, having that absolute focus on that and understanding where you're tracking, we obviously focus a lot around the team rather than individual performance. And that is to insulate people against those outliers that you can't always control within customer success. But I think one around focus is that, okay? Two is, as the way we talk, the internal cadences we have are really focused around actionable next steps. So like our top of funnel, bottom of funnel review. How are we reviewing the accounts? What are our next steps to renewal? What are our next steps to growth? what are the next steps in the program? And it is literally those bullet points that on a weekly basis, or when you're starting your day, you can look and say, right, what do I need to nail on that account? If there's one thing I need to move on that account to get it where it needs to be, depending on where it is in its life cycle and how close we are to renewal, this is what I need to do. I think otherwise, I think probably the attitude you hold usually kind of rubs off on people to a certain extent, and you'd probably agree. I'm pretty laser focused on what we need to do, how we need to get there, and I trust people as adults, and I'm keen for people to manage their own diaries, manage their own lives. Absolutely not a micromanager or anything like that. But what I do expect is people to really bring their game, And so I think being very clear in your expectations, clear on where we're tracking, where we're falling down, where we're exceeding, and having actually tangible information to back that up rather than a feeling. I think there's some pretty key ways to help people be focused on goal.
Yeah, I like that. And as a manager, and I could be wrong, but maybe for other potential managers out there, I feel like a lot of time you're brought in as an escalation point. So there's a lot of de-escalating to do, right? So as a manager, how much of your role would you say is centered around basically de-escalating, and how much of it is maybe on, more positive things like driving towards value, as you've said?
Look, I think if the majority of your time is taking care of escalations, I think you're fundamentally doing your job wrong. Okay. One, if everything is escalations, then I would suggest that the structure of the organization, the way that your team is working, and the experience you're providing customers is not where it needs to be, firstly. So you hope that you're going to be in a scenario where you're not dealing with them all the time. But I think, outside of the escalation piece for a second, it's that, I do think that a key part of being a good manager, a good leader, is that, you're there with your team and that you're in the trenches, right? And, if you're kind of sat on a lofty stool and you're only wanting good news to come to you, you're not actually being the support that your team requires. So, I do really believe in getting stuck in where my team want me, all right? So it's not about micromanaging, it's not about taking over, but it's understanding how can I provide actual value to each of my team members, and that can be very different, right? We can have team members who may need a lot more support on the commercial side. We have others where actually they're absolutely nailing the commercial side, but actually navigating the business and building better relationships with key stakeholders is maybe more their challenge, or they don't kind of put so much emphasis on it. And so I think I like to spend much more of my time doing that and making sure that I'm always available in a timely manner to teammates. Otherwise, it's pretty frustrating. But escalations themselves, look, fortunately, it's a minority of my time. That's also partly a result of working at a great business with a great product. But yes, I do think it's very important to be involved in escalations. I don't want my team handling it, me only getting the good news. I think it's important that I'm there as a support, but typically because of maybe, my perception of the situation, or, having greater context regarding the organization or the art of the possible, I might be able to support the team member and therefore support the client in a way that, the CSM themselves might not have been aware of, right? So, if you put a percentage on it, fortunately, it's probably about 90-10.
Okay, good.
which is nice. But look, you go through periods where it's not like that, and it's hard work.
Yeah, and I think the reason I was asking that question is for anybody who's potentially looking to get into management, just trying to paint a picture of what they can expect to get themselves into. So on that note, what would you say a typical day or week looks like in the life of a manager of a CS team?
So again, I'm going to say, my opinion is actually, I don't think there is a hugely set agenda right now. There are some core things that I obviously want to, focus on a weekly basis. We have our core cadences, that we hold as discipline to understand what is going on within the quarter, what's going on with the month, what's going on with, specialist accounts, for example. But outside of that, make a lot of time for team members and accounts, whatever's going on. I think it's very important, as I think, I just said, is to make sure you're available. If you pack your diary full of leadership stuff and you're never actually available to support your team, you're not doing your job, in my view. So it is very flexible, but one of the first things, in the morning is, looking across all of our dashboards, all of our data feeds, understanding where we're at in the quarter, whether it's across our usage products, whether it's across our SaaS products, understanding where we're at, what's happened overnight. Obviously, we're going through the inbox and checking what needs to be prioritized for the day. But typically, a lot of my time is spent internally. And I probably should be in front of clients more. That's something you always want to do more of. But fundamentally, my role is to kind of grease the wheels and make your lives easier. Yeah. Right. And so that's probably what the majority of my time is spent on.
I like that. And then I'm going back a bit, but you mentioned something which was really poignant, that with SMB, with mid-market, with enterprise, you should be specialists within each sector. I suppose my question to you is, what is it about management that was attractive, and what should people be considering, right? Because I think, like you said, people assume that you go from one to the other to enterprise, and then you're a manager, and then, you've done it. But that's not necessarily the case. You don't have to become a manager to progress in customer success, do you?
No, not at all. I think, again, that typical viewpoint that the only way to progress is up the management ladder is false. And I think it's probably a pretty lazy assumption, and probably also shows an inefficient internal mobility model within your company. It is easier said than done. You can't always create new roles out of nowhere, right? But I think in terms of looking to go into management and leadership, for me, I don't really know why, but I had always grown up with a vast sense of responsibility. I don't really know why. And with that, I seem to take a lot of accountability and ownership for things. It makes me a bit of a warrior. I am anxious about many things and want things to be right. But I think, with that, I kind of had like a craving to do more. And to a certain extent, it's probably a need for control. I always remember my mum kind of saying to me, don't worry about the things you can't control. Yeah. And as I've got older, I've got better at that. Still not great. But I think probably part of that is that, if I can be responsible, if I can take ownership, then I can, direct things which I believe in the best direction for the business and the people around me. And, I think I always, throughout my career, have wanted to take on more, but I've had an affinity for working with people. I really enjoy working with people and seeing them succeed. And I think one of the big things about management and leadership is I think there can be a lot of self-centered focus on advancement with it. But actually, if you're wanting to become a leader, what to expect is it's pretty thankless, and that's not to get a tiny violin out, but it's more like you are supposed to be doing the unseen work to allow your team members to shine, to be able to get to where they want to go, to be able to support them in their challenges and raise them up with their achievements. And so I think you need to be prepared and willing to not be the center of attention, to as I said, be able to raise others up and take joy in that, but also be comfortable that the buck stops with you, and mistakes happen, and it's natural, and it's not about blame game. You have to be able to step up, understand the situation, and go, okay, I own that. I'm going to help fix it. And so I think people think about the title, and they potentially think about the pay rise they're going to get through becoming a manager, but it's a very different set of requirements on you than being an IC. And, one of the typical things we see in tech, which I'm sure you've seen in previous jobs, is that like super successful lone wolf. People go, oh, well, his numbers are unbelievable. Her numbers are unbelievable. Make her a manager. And a lot of the times that doesn't work. We need to look past numbers. You need to look at, both quantitative and qualitative traits in people as to whether they're going to be a good leader or not.
And on that mention of traits, what would you say the top traits are in really good leaders?
Sure. I mean, opinion. I guess that, I was going to say that question probably assumes that I'm a great leader. So,
I can say he's pretty good.
In my opinion. So, no, look, I think a couple of things. One is is having real clarity of purpose, and I think there's this really good Richard Branson quote that I've said way too many times, and it's probably been quoted a million different places. But it's easy to make things difficult, and it's difficult to make things easy. And I think if you have a trait, if you are able to approach your work with a real clarity of purpose and always strip back the external and the extraneous information, there is so much and people get really bogged down in it. And if you can really strip it all out and look at the fundamentals, right, where is B? We're at A, how do we get to B? And it really is trying to kind of get back to the fundamentals. I think that's very important. And a lot of people are very good at making things difficult. And that creates a lot of inefficiency in an organization. So I think that's one. I think two is being an actual active listener. We all like to think we can listen. The majority of people don't listen well, and they're actually just loading up their next preconceived debating point, right? And so actually being able to process what someone is saying to you is so important. Making people feel like they're actually heard and understanding what they're saying. And what they're saying is not always the top level words, okay? We know that there can be kind of subliminal meaning. I think that's really important. I'm not going to list out endless, but I think, another one, and I think we're moving in the right direction with it, is having empathy. Empathy and trust, right? And I think we're getting a lot better than that. Tech historically was very male dominated, and I've worked in the bullpens where it's just ego, macho, and I'm very glad we're moving away from that steadily. We've still got a lot of work to be done. But I think with that, having empathy as a leader, being able to understand the challenges that not just your staff go through, but other areas of the business go through, and being able to connect on that level, and then understand what they need and how you can support them is really key. It is important to not be overly empathetic, because otherwise sometimes you can't then deliver the tough news, or the tough feedback. So you do need to be balanced. And as I said, maybe the final bit I will say there, otherwise I'll just chew your ear off endlessly, and I'm very conscious of that, is trust. And, I'd like to think we've got really good trust in our team and in our org. And, I fundamentally believe that we should be treating people like adults. Yeah. And I believe if you treat people like adults and you enable them to manage their own diaries, their own days, their own work-life balance, as long as the work is done, as long as we're getting to the numbers, then we can be proud of what we've done. Yeah. I don't need people working 12-hour days or not sleeping or any of this stuff. We know that, at certain times of the year, there can be pinch points, or there might be clients at certain time zones where you have to go above and beyond. We know that, but at the same time, we can balance it. And I think moving away from micromanaging and a lack of trust is huge in leaders, because I do genuinely believe you get better out of people.
I agree. And I think
I can't even remember what the question was.
No.
So.
I was like, I was saying, what are the traits that make up a good leader? You gave us a lot of traits, but hey, look, for the leaders listening, you're welcome. Building a customer-centric culture is crucial. How do you foster a mindset within your team that prioritizes the customer experience at every touch point?
Sure. So again, I do think that is overcomplicated by people. Fundamentally, every decision you make needs to be focused on what is best for the customer. Okay. And as I said, that is not about the customer is always right. It's actually about being a trusted advisor. And, within CS, I can't remember what the name of the model is called, but it really talks about the different stages of relationship and trust that you build with a customer. And the pinnacle is becoming a trusted advisor. And that is not always saying what they want to hear or what they think is right. It's telling them what is going to be the best solution for them, what is going to drive the best bang for their buck. And so I think really stripping it down, and being like, right, how do we deliver against the customer's requirements? And if every single thing you do, you draw back the conversation to that, again, you strip out all of the things that don't matter. And I think, I said earlier on, and again, this can differ by segment, but if it's the one or two pain points that you just do not waver off and you deliver against, and you then focus on communicating the value that you have delivered, you typically are not going to have a problem with retention. And so that absolute focus with every single one of your clients as to what do they need to be successful and how do we get there, it's simple. And then it's a case of, once you know that, right, who are the stakeholders that we require within our business to help get them there? And if you can then make sure that everyone has that clarity of purpose, that we're not needing to do all these endless initiatives or things like that, that we're always focused as a project with that customer on X, then usually you don't have too many problems. I think the bit where people fall down in this piece is typically not having it documented and not communicating it well enough. We usually have ideas as to what we think success is or value is. And, QBRs can sometimes be a little bit out the box, and we don't always think what the wider picture is. And so, again, if we're being really customer centric, we're understanding what matters most to them, what metrics they care about most, how they think about it as an organization, who they need to report to, what their fears are. And if we know that, and if we have that curiosity to continue to understand and learn more, then we know that every action we take is going to be customer centric, but individual to that customer, rather than being cookie cutter, one size fits all, because SaaS is moving away from that.
I agree. And yeah, just hearing what you said there, I think ahead of QBRs, it's so paramount to, for me as a customer success manager, to reach out to clients in advance and not have it out of the box, and make sure that we're clear on the objectives, like you said, so we can tailor our presentations and whatever we're going to present to them to their needs, to make sure we're aligned, and then we can plan accordingly.
Yeah, I think there's just a couple of bits there to add. One is with QBR, and this is more relevant maybe in an enterprise space, but I think one of the biggest things is getting the draft in front of your main POC before the meeting. Obviously, we want to make sure that other stakeholders, more senior stakeholders, the DMs, the senior influencers are there, and actually coaching them through it, and them giving you valuable information as to actually they're going to perceive it this way, or actually let's not use that metric because they're going to see through X. I think really having that from an enterprise perspective is very important, because you then know that when you deliver that message to the C-suite, the senior members of staff within the team, it's going to land. And you're also helping your main POC look like a superstar. And then they're going to give you more in return. They're going to support you. The only other bit that I just wanted to add there is curiosity. And I think having that focus on always wanting to learn more and being willing to ask the dumb question. I know we've talked about it. Being willing to kind of be submissive. You don't need to be a know-it-all. You don't need to look like you know what every acronym means or everything means within the industry. Yeah. Actually being submissive, being like, hey, I'd love to understand a little bit more about that. And if you can come off every single touch point with a customer knowing one more thing about that account or one more thing around the brand, you're going to have a much better picture. And again, that's going to allow you to be more customer-centric and more individualized in your service to that particular account.
How do you handle customer feedback, especially when it's less than positive? And what steps do you take to turn it into actionable insights for improvement?
I know there can be a bit of a school of thought, which is that to never apologize and to never accept blame or culpability. I fundamentally disagree with that. We're all humans. And typically when things don't go very well, there are emotional responses to them. And so I think it's important to treat it in a humanistic way. And that is to listen, to actively listen, to show that you are listening, to empathize with the situation and the experience that person is having. Again, I think we're very used to looking within our own bubble. Everyone looks within their own bubble, what matters to them. But actually, if you look outside and again and start to understand actually why a particular POC is maybe so upset or what the downstream impacts are, I think that's really important to understand because you understand the severity of the issue. You understand, the impact, and that could be useful for things down the line like potential compensation or, contractual pieces. So I think one is, yes, you absolutely listen. 2, you're empathetic. 3, I really don't think there's anything wrong with apologizing. Now, that doesn't always mean that you're taking full accountability. It may be a multi-party situation and the blame is, or the issue is kind of all 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But I think it is important to stand up and say, I do apologize for the experience you've received. And I think it's then fundamentally about showing the actions you're taking. It's about being communicative, even over-communicative, to make the client feel that you really are taking the situation seriously, that you care, and that you want to resolve it in a timely manner, and that it's then not just a case of, we fixed it, it's all good. It's, what are we doing to go above and beyond? How are we making them actually feel better about it, and that we truly care rather than just glorified tech support, that we're actually moving the needle and moving the partnership forward and improving the relationship. So I think there's that. And when you mentioned about kind of actionable insights, obviously, look, we collect data. There's endless amounts of data. We've obviously got kind of our end indicators in terms of retention rate and logo. And if people are having bad experiences, those numbers are not going to be good. But we also collect things like CSAT, right? We collect NPS. And, those are really important metrics for us. I think sometimes CSMs might look at them as a wall of data. It doesn't really matter, or it's come from someone they don't really talk to, and so they don't care. But actually, it really builds a picture. And again, it should feed our curiosity. That random contact that we haven't heard of before that's given us a 2. Well, they didn't click on 0; they clicked on 2, for example. So why? What can we learn from that? And what risk indicators could that provide us for the wider partnership, for example? So I think it's really important to actually, not ignore that data and to review it. And I think the other piece is, if we can make it a learning moment, and if it is something that, potentially is relevant to other team members, other departments, it's important to over communicate it, right? It's not about solving it and then just on to the next one and hope it doesn't happen again. Yeah. It's how do we feed back internally, whether it's the product R&D, whether it's actually our working practices rather than the product that was at fault. How do we actually improve our processes and work with the relevant stakeholders in that? And then, finally is really spreading the word to other team members. We don't want people experiencing it again and again. It's not fun, right? So I think there's kind of a combination of ways that we can, I'm not going to say turn a negative into a positive, but take that negative situation and make things better. If we keep doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same result, it's the definition of insanity, right? Yeah. So I think those are the pieces to focus on there.
The thing that keeps coming to my mind, and you'll see that my mind scatters all over the place. As a manager, you've obviously got a lot of people under you, they've each got their own priorities. And to everyone, it's a bit like customers. Their priority is the top priority. How do you prioritize between colleagues? And you don't even have to talk about like us necessarily, right? As a manager, what should be the key considerations, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah, look, I think, one, I did just want to say, you mentioned working under. I do think it is really important that as a mindset, as a leader, you're working with. I think, again, people get a little bit too obsessed with hierarchy. Much of that actually doesn't matter. You're all focusing towards a common goal, right? And, actually, as I mentioned to you, like, I see it as greasing the wheels, or I also say shoveling shit for you guys to, achieve your best, right? And to contribute to the number. So that aside, I think working with team members with different goals, different interests, different pressures, honestly, it's one of the best bits of the job. I really enjoy it. I think prioritization, I don't know if that's the right word. I think, fundamentally, that through a working year or during someone's tenure at a job, people are in different phases, right? You'll have the multi-year tenure experienced expert, you'll have the new starter who's ramping, maybe have someone who's coming towards the end of their journey at the company and is feeling a bit disaffected. You've got all of those different scenarios. And so really it's not about prioritization, it's about judging each of those situations on their own merits and understanding what you can do for that person. And look, the reality is you're going to do more for others than others, right? If you have issues with a member of staff who is approaching the end of their journey at the business and has significant performance issues, and you've gone through a number of processes to try and improve that performance, and it's just not coming, or it's just not working for that person, the conversations as well as the time you're putting into that person's development is going to be different to someone who's ramping in the business and needs a lot more support in terms of how to navigate the business or the best practices of how to farm their book. Whereas, the tenured, CSM who's shown, excellence for a period of time, you're really trying to understand what excites them, right? And so actually having those different conversations is really exciting to me. I think the biggest thing is to show people not just that you care and that you listen, that you can actually do something, right? Yeah. If you don't actually do anything and you don't actually enact any change, then people feel like they're banging their heads against a brick wall, and people can feel disaffected pretty quickly. So again, I think that clarity of feedback, trying to give as much clarity to the journey as possible, and really supporting them at every stage with it, wherever they are in the business, their tenure, their expertise. You've just got to show you're there, right?
All right. On that, and I know we've kind of touched upon it before, but I think it's good. There are only so many management positions. If there are CSMs who are looking for their next step, but it's not necessarily management, what would you advise they consider?
Sure. So I think, one is, are there different segments, right, within different segments or different verticals that would be of interest to you? Now, maybe the job, there will still be similarities within customer success, but I think that is one thing that's really important. Many companies are split by verticals, and, people can have real passions within that. I know Yoppa in the past was verticalized, and, some of our most successful people were heavily focused within, the cosmetics and beauty space, for example. So whether actually looking and whether the business is open to specializing by vertical, by region, for example, if you can take advantage of language skills, for example, or if you have particular cultural affinities, again, that can be a really, really useful way to kind of refresh and renew your challenge. Or, as I said, going between the different segments. I think then if you go kind of outside of typical customer success, I think there's a couple of things you can look at. One is, and something we've looked at, is, those kind of liaison roles, or those kind of matrix roles. So yes, you work within CS, but also you kind of have product overlay. So you might be a specialist in, pushing feedback regarding a particular product and working with product on roadmap and working with product marketing and learning and enablement on, developing learning content and promotional content and things like that. And so even without moving away from your particular IC role, we can build space for people to start to build experience and indulge in other passions or real interests within the business. If we're moving kind of completely outside of customer success, I think an area that typically has a couple of areas that typically people find a lot of value in. One is account management. So what we'll sometimes see is with our more commercial leaning, less technically gifted or dedicated CSMs want to move into account management. Still being able to work with accounts rather than prospects, but being able to really focus on that kind of commercial and negotiation side. It's typically an area we see people develop into. The other area is actually within product. People moving into kind of that product manager role. Again, being that really great conduit between what we're seeing in the market from customers and where product is going. And I think a lot of SaaS companies we know, sometimes product roadmap is slightly disconnected from what the market is always doing or what customers are saying or wanting. Partly because what customers are saying or wanting might not always be sexy. And especially being pre-IPO and being a private company, typically to drive hockey stick growth, to appease your investors, you're looking to launch sexy products, right? And so again, we see that as a big growth area where CSMs kind of go into that product manager role to really kind of bring those organizations closer together. And in fact, I've just thought of one more. The final one I would also say, and some companies have these, some don't, but I've seen a lot of CSMs go into learning and enablement. How do you actually help enable a workforce at large? And that's building content, doing webinars, all of the things involved with actually upskilling a CS organization. At Yotpo, we're fortunate. We've got a large CS organization, and that needs a lot of support. We've obviously seen CSMs go on to have, really fantastic careers within L&E. So, yeah, I think those are a few things for people to think about anyway.
Yeah, a lot for people to consider. No, I think it's good to touch on because, to your point, I don't think everybody wants to even become a manager. I think people see it as the logical next step, but it doesn't have to be. So I think 100%. It's good to just hear from yourself, some of the things that they can consider.
And I think the biggest thing there is that you're not a failure. If you don't, I think people are so scared of being seen to do the right thing. No, the right thing is being great at your job and being happy at your job. Yeah. Being content, your job, that's the right thing. Like going into a manager role because you've been told that your last 3 courses have been off the charts and that's your next step. If those aren't your skill sets and you don't have an interest in that, trust me, 6 months later, you'll be burnt out and you'll be out the door.
Preparing yourself for failure.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. In a globalized business environment, how do you address cultural nuances and diverse customer needs within your customer success approach?
So I think this is going to overlay slightly maybe with another question I think you might ask. But I was very fortunate that I was able to learn a lot off my dad. He worked around the world and worked in technology too. And so I had the good fortune to work with a lot of different cultures and a lot of different working styles. And he so I learned off him. 2, if you don't have that available to you, is a book that I actually purchased called When Cultures Collide. Okay. And you can buy it off Amazon and things like that. And it's basically a longer...
Use my code to get 10% off. No, I'm joking.
And it's basically, it's a longitudinal study. I've forgotten the university that contributes into it. But fundamentally, it's a longitudinal study that's always ongoing. And it's constantly analysing changes in society and cultures around the world and applying it to business. Mm-hmm. And... they release new volumes every few years because, as we know, society continues to change pretty rapidly, and working styles and what was acceptable 5 years ago is not acceptable now, and Definitely. All of those things. And this book is fascinating because it can break it down by region, and all of these different things, and it's fantastic for giving you insight as to how people approach their work, and, not just kind of the stereotypical or the typical kind of work customs. Always hear, for example, in Switzerland, there needs to be 50 minutes of small talk before you start work, otherwise it's rude. Past those assumptions, or things like that, it also goes into kind of the emotional responses and things like that. And so that's been really fascinating for me, especially coming to Yotpo, being an Israeli American business. Again, we're working with a lot of different cultures and different approaches to maybe the kind of Anglo-Saxon, Western, maybe kind of British American, slant is a different way of working to many other cultures around the world. And I think if you think that you can go with a one-size-fits-all approach, one, the likelihood is at some point you're going to be disrespectful. But two, you're probably not be very successful. It's important that we are aware of others, and that we learn off others. And if we can align with their customs, then we'll probably be able to do better business together. So that's been, fantastic for me. But also throughout my career is that I've been very keen to work with, different regions and things like that. And so, I've been able to work with, APAC as an overall region, but then breaking that down into, how Australia is going to be different to Singapore, Japan, Philippines, example, and then how that differs compared to Northern Europe versus Southern Europe. Again, there are sweeping generalizations here, but, I think being able to actually, throughout your career, kind of test yourself in different areas like that has been very exciting for me, and it has taught me a huge about myself. But also the world and how to work well with people.
Nice. I like that. And then just following on from that, technology is constantly evolving, not just cultures. How do you leverage the latest tools and technologies to enhance your team's efficiency and effectiveness in delivering exceptional customer experiences?
That's a very good question, and I have a feeling I'm not going to provide a very good answer because I'm probably a bit of a granddad in this regard. I don't know if I do believe in utilizing all of the very newest tech. I sometimes believe that there's a lot of tech out there that finds solutions to problems that didn't really exist. That's not me being stubborn. I think there are many examples of that. Fundamentally, to me, I think we think about our role. We have Salesforce, Tableau, Inbox, Slack, GChat. It goes on and on. The ways that we can communicate with one another, where we can communicate, what data we can see, is pretty constant. I think, look, a couple of things. One is, do people actually use their inbox properly? We typically use Gmail, but even in Outlook, are people actually using folders correctly? Are people using filters correctly that actually automate some of that administration for you? Are people using do not disturb? I think that's so key when you're getting Slack, chatted constantly. Can you actually create focus time that allows you just to focus on that one specific task that you're looking to get done that day, so that you don't have that kind of scope creep in work? That is always one. It's not sexy, but a lot of people don't use their inboxes properly. Yeah. Personally, I utilize it as, I need to end the day and get to zero. And then everything is filtered away. And that gives me clarity of mind. If I kind of come into an inbox with hundreds or thousands and everything's everywhere, I find that my work is jumbled. So personally, I really advise people to get to a way of working with their inbox that gives them clarity of purpose and calmness.
I have OCD about my inbox. If it doesn't get to zero, if it's not a zero, like sometimes it's really bad. I'll check it on holiday just because I see it like 100, 200. I'm like, no.
And that's unhealthy, right?
That is really unhealthy.
That's really unhealthy.
But I know what you mean.
But it's a natural thing, right? And it's also important that people aren't just like reading and filtering stuff away without actually processing it and actioning it. But look, I do think that is a really important piece. I do think that do not disturb is a really important piece because we can be contacted across endless channels. The other one I would say is that I think also the amount of times that CSMs are reinventing the wheel and writing new emails every single time whether it's Yesware or in fact, even there's even Google templates, actually utilizing things that if you have particular things that you're dealing with regularly, and being able to have stock emails that you can put in place and customize ever so slightly. Obviously, it's important to make sure they are customized, so it doesn't say, hey, XXX or whatever. But I do think that's one that is really key and can save people a lot of time. And then look, I love Salesforce. Outside of that, I really don't use a ton. Now that's probably different. My role will differ to others. But fundamentally, like my focus is again, simplicity and clarity. And if I can bring that to my work, and again, it's typically through giving myself windows to actually focus and understand the information that I'm being fed, then typically I can impart that onto my teammates, right? ChatGPT, I think it's interesting. Obviously, you mentioned. I know it's obviously maybe not the sexy new thing now, but it is something that the people think have endless applications. And AI obviously can be very powerful. However, we've been talking about AI and machine learning for years within SaaS, and I think how it's applied is key. It's a buzzword. A lot of the time, it doesn't actually deliver additional value. I think we are starting to get to the point where SaaS businesses are starting to get to the point where it actually is delivering value. I think Yotpo Taylor will be really exciting to see as it automates many tasks for our customers. So I think ChatGPT, when people are like, oh, it can write you the most amazing prospect email, or it can, come up with the most amazing de-escalation email, I'd be very careful with it. We have fundamental skills in our ability to process so much information, extraneous and internal information, overlaying our previous experience. ChatGPT does not have previous experience in customer success. It does not have previous experience in your book of business. And so when I hear people kind of going like, oh, I've done this, that, the other, to me, it gets me very nervous. I would much rather for that, the most important email you're going to send that day, spending that extra 5-10 minutes on it.
And do it yourself.
And crafting it and getting it right, rather than getting a externally trained bot to do it for you. So I know I sound painfully old-fashioned.
No.
And someone's going to be like, you could do your job X% better by doing all this stuff. And I'm open to it. If someone can show me the absolute value I'm going to get out of something additional, I'll 100% use it.
You've been challenged.
Yeah, exactly. The problem is a lot of stuff I've been handed by people
not necessarily that
hasn't
good.
really given me much more.
Yeah, I agree. On that note, being a manager of customer success, what would you say the most stressful part of your job is?
Good question. Look, quite a lot of it is. Again, not going to sugarcoat it. It's not a relaxing job. And maybe it's my approach. I am on 24/7. I do believe in work-life balance, and I especially believe in it for my staff. I'm probably not as good at it myself. If I'm responding at a time of night or early in the morning, I 100% don't expect responses from people. But it's kind of the way that I can kind of control the environment, I guess, around me, right? So look, it's stressful because I want to deliver the best possible for the business, and I want to deliver the best possible for my teammates and staff. So I think the most stressful element of it is that you have responsibilities to others, right? Like, I want you to fly. I want you to have unbelievable quarters. I want you to be rewarded for that. I want you to have personal development and professional development. And I take that seriously. And that's a lot of pressure. And so you multiply that by, the number of different teammates that you have, and trying to do the best by your staff, even while you're having poor quarters. There are challenging macroeconomic conditions right now. I'm sure a lot of people are experiencing it, and you cannot be depressed about it the whole time. You need to be able to put on a positive face, be motivating, be a good teammate to others, and so. You kind of need to paddle along under the water and hide that kind of stress from people, and give them what they need to succeed. So I think the responsibility that you have to others is that, along with the stress of, trying to keep the show moving while there are potentially challenges outside of your control.
I hear that. Flipping it on its head, as a manager of a customer success team, what would you say the most rewarding thing is? I feel it's going to be very similar.
Look, it has to be two things. It has to be performance and personal development. We put a lot into it, right? And a lot of the time it's not easy. And we do ask a lot of people, and it is high pressured. And, look, at the end of the day, are we doing brain surgery? No. But it's important to us because of the standards we hold and the responsibilities we have to our clients and our brands, right? And so, it is important to us. So seeing when all that hard work comes to fruition, and it can be even the smallest thing of like, that onboarding where we're going through mud and yet we get it live and they're instantly having fantastic performance. So even from kind of, delivering that dream to a brand on one level, to having an excellent quarter where everyone's hit their accelerators and gets to celebrate at the end of that quarter is a great feeling. But those are fleeting and it's always on to the next challenge. The thing that remains for me, and it's not because I'm taking any particular credit or thinking about myself first, but the things that I remember most over like a good quarter, a good deal or anything is, being able to help people progress in their careers. And, when you do that, you're fundamentally helping people change their lives, right? And, whether it's greater prosperity or, greater experience or having the confidence, I will say probably the most rewarding is when you see someone join a business and seeing their change. And usually that person doesn't even see their own change until you tell them. And that's pretty awesome. I find that very satisfying.
Talking about progress, obviously being a manager, you interviewed me, you've interviewed a lot of people, hired a lot of people. What would you say, what would your key piece of advice be to anybody who's like interviewing for, let's say first a CSM role?
Sure. So I have three.
You have three pieces of advice? Okay.
Yeah, is that right?
Yeah,
am I allowed that?
Three for the price of one, we'll take it.
Yeah, sure. So look, one is authenticity. I think people get really scared in interviews that they need to like reel off
everything they know,
and they need to be able to know it all, and they need to reel off these models and studies. Look, I don't know them by name, and so I never think that comes across as very authentic, and I think it can come across as arrogant or defensive. I think showing authenticity that you don't know everything, but that what you do, you're very good at, and that you're very passionate about. And I think a lot of the times showing you care is very authentic. Again, this kind of like, I'm too cool or I'm so professional, like showing that something really excites you or that you really care about it, I think is very disarming. And I think very exciting for people when interviewing to go, oh, wow, that's the kind of character that we want in the business. I think that's one. I think second is curiosity. It drives me mad when people don't ask questions. If I had one the other day, I had an interview the other day, and got to the end, we'd left 15 minutes for questions. It was a panel of 4 interviewers. They hadn't met 3 of the 4. And yet there was not a single question. And that's just such a missed opportunity. And if you think of like what we talked about earlier in our chat regarding curiosity, that's a perfect time for you to show your ability to complete additional discovery, to be curious, to want to learn more. That is such a key role of a CSM. So if you don't show that in the interview, why would you be hired? Yeah. In my opinion. And third one, which I think is maybe more just in interview technique, and this is something that I've like carried with myself throughout my career, is, I always got worried that I would leave something on the table and that I'd then have regrets from an interview. And I was talking to a friend the other day who was actually supposed to go into an interview process after a long time within their business. And my kind of biggest piece of advice, and I really do stick by it, is to pick 3 things whether they're traits, skills, experiences, maybe even stories that highlight experiences, traits, or skills. Having 3 of those, and I really wouldn't have more, because I think you overestimate how much people take in and absorb in interviews. But if you have those 3 things that you know that if you deliver them and land them during your interview, that they say the best things about you and why you're best suited to that job and that role, then you can have no regrets because you've given the best of yourself, right? And so, I always like to have a little note of the 3 bullet points, those 3 key points that I want to land in that interview. And if I've landed it, then I know that even if I wasn't successful in that process, I delivered the message that I wanted to, and I've given the best account of myself. And it's something I look for in interviews, where I try and deduce what the key points are that candidate wanted to deliver about themselves. And a lot of the times it's not clear. And I think that's a really interesting piece. And I think it then helps people to not have regrets or to feel anxious. And, it helps you both accept success, right? Because you go, oh, great. They like who I am. They like my skills and experience. But 2, it also allows you to accept failure because you know that you put everything you wanted to on the table. So those are my 3 things, but the final one being that kind of main interview technique.
Love that. I think to any CSMs you might be interviewing, they've got a lot to take away from that. It sounds like, you've mentioned the fact that you're always switched on. Do you have any productivity hacks?
Productivity hacks. Look, I do think one of the main ones is taking advantage of do not disturb. There are all of these functions with any of the inboxes, any of our chat solutions. And I think, between our laptop and our mobile devices, you can just be inundated with alerts. I think it's really important to set aside, at the start of my day, I am reviewing dashboards. I'm reviewing data. I'm writing a to-do list. That's also a productivity hack. Yeah. I like to have a very clear list of what I'm trying to get through that day. And what constitutes a good day's work to me is getting those parts done. Actually nailing all my emails a lot of the time will not mean it's a good day's work. It just means you've processed emails. And we know there's a lot of pointless emails that get sent. So for me, it is really being disciplined with my time. 1, 2, to-do lists. And 3, I do think it's a really big one, is regular breaks. And I don't think I'm always very good at it, partly because I'm not always very good at having absolute control in my calendar. There's many studies that say past 90 minutes, your brain is pretty much jelly. And I really do try and enforce to not go over 90 minutes back to back. And even if it's literally just 5 minutes just to grab a drink or whatever, I think we underestimate how much our brain is processing during that break and how much we refresh ourselves. So those are probably the areas that I really focus on.
Okay. Moving from taking breaks to burnout. And the reason I say that is because we started to ask this question to a lot of people on the episode. On the podcast, episode. 1, have you experienced burnout? And then 2, if the answer is yes, what would your advice be to any managers who are potentially feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah, so I think I do think burnout has become a bit of a catch-all term. And I don't mean this as if it's not valid, but I think it has kind of become one of those psychobabble terms that's kind of become part of our vocabulary. And I don't think we always know what it actually means. And I think there's many levels to it. But yeah, I probably have had something approaching it, or heavy fatigue. I think it's natural. I don't think it should be something that's frowned upon, or, just like when we think of how our approaches to mental health have improved so much over the last few years. I think burnout, there's still a bit of a macho culture of like, you're weak. Well, actually, modern workplace demands are vast. We talk about, not being able to disconnect, having all your emails on your phone, being able to be pinged at any hour of the day. It's very natural to become fatigued. So I 100% get it. In fact, pretty much every year, there's a particular point in the year where I kind of, need to take a couple of days to reset my energy, and I usually get ill during that time, and then I, come back. So I don't think it's something to be ridiculed or embarrassed about. I think it's about learning what works for you and how to manage your energy, and that feeds into work-life balance and things like that. I think in terms of advice, to managers, I think is really listening to your body. I've worked with some really unhealthy people in the past. And what I mean by that, for example, worked with an old VP, and I loved him, thought he was great. But, on the day of the birth of his first child, he was back in the office.
Yeah, that is.
And we had to kick him out of the office and be like, why are you here? Go on paternity leave. And I think, people having that perspective to go, what's really important right now? It is really important to listen to your body and to give yourself the rest it deserves. Otherwise, you're not going to perform your best. Take holiday. Don't think that you need to be this trooper that doesn't take any of their holiday. It's there. Use it.
Yeah.
You are going to perform much better coming back from holiday than that burnt out person just before holiday who's just about hanging on. So take holiday, listen to your body, and find things that interest you and give you cathartism and take your mind off work.
And that leads me such a great segue into my next question. How do you unwind?
So I'm one of those people that likes golf, / obsessed with golf. So again, sounding like a right old man. Honestly, love that though. But actually, a lot of the time, less so for the actual sport itself, as much as I do love the sport. Honestly, it's a walk in nature with your best mates. I mean, that's great. And I think especially as men who maybe aren't always good at having more vulnerable conversations or talking about more substantial things than, I don't know, fantasy football. I think some. I don't know why I thought of that one, but
I do.
Yeah. But like outside of that, I think it's I've had some of the best and most in-depth conversations I've ever had on the golf course, and so I think that's been incredibly valuable to me.
Yep.
And it is 4 hours of complete shut off and cathartism. That I always love going out and, eating. And, I probably have a little bit too much wine. I'm building up a wine collection, which I really shouldn't be doing. So, I think that probably keeps me busy enough anyway in free time.
I love that. For anybody looking to either get started in CS or management, what would your key piece of advice be for them?
Yeah, so I think within customer success, I think to start with, you need to find a business that really believes in professional growth. And sadly, they're not all out there. Typically, customer success, it's quite hard for your first job out of uni, for example, to be customer success because it is customer facing. There's typically wider ecosystem knowledge that's required, or technical knowledge, project management experience required, and just actually having the confidence of your management to be client facing. So it's quite difficult to come, say, straight from university. I think the well-trodden route is typically through business development. And many people will go into sales and then go, actually, again, like myself, I want to work on, want to have longer term relationships with clients and work on delivering tangible projects. So I think that's quite a well-trodden path, especially within SaaS technology. I think we're seeing more and more, though, that people straight from business development, those kind of starter roles, are being encouraged to look wider than just sales. So I do think for customer success, it is quite difficult to kind of come out of nowhere. If you are, typically you're going to have project management experience from other industries, or you might have very specific, for example, we're in the e-commerce industry. If you had very specific e-com or CRM, or development skills, for example, then actually you can transfer those across quite nicely. But that will kind of limit what areas of SaaS you might be able to work in. So I think that's, typically what you would look at. But I do think the biggest thing which is underlooked is project management skills. And so if you can do like project management courses, I think that could be a really powerful, additional lever of influence for you in interview processes. Another one is language skills.
Yep.
As SaaS continues to internationalize properly, the epicenter still is typically the US. How we internationalize, English language does not cut it everywhere. We can provide better service through localized languages, and so again, having those language skills is incredibly attractive.
And then, for anyone looking to get into management,
yeah. So again, I think that one is actually showing an active interest. Now, one, you can do that through how you work every day. Do you take accountability and ownership? Do you treat your book of business like it's your business? Does the buck stop with you? If you are someone who, struggles to stand up and be responsible and say, this is on me, and you look for others to do it for you, or you wait for others to take the lead, like, management's not for you. And I think you'd be quite quickly told that if someone has your best interests at heart. So I think, one, you got to start with that. Two is actively showing interest. Like, I know we've talked about it, and wanting to understand more about the numbers, wanting to understand more about business administration, not just your book of business, your clients, but what's going on within the region. Well, what's going on within the team, what's going on within the region. How are we doing globally? Okay, how does our team work with that team, for example? And starting to really show that interest, because building that knowledge, early on will make the ramp a lot easier. But it also makes clear, typically, to your leadership team that you want more and you're not scared to shy away from the challenge. What I advise people away from is taking on endless, pointless initiatives. Like, I remember at a previous job when I was an IC, my manager said, well, as part of your professional development and to show that you can take on more responsibility and be a leader, can you do the training for the team on HR software as to how to log holiday? I mean, how does that help me? How does that help me prove how to be a leader? How does that give me proper skills? It didn't. She just didn't want to do the training, and she thought that was just a way of getting off a plate onto me. So, I think it's important not just to take anything you're given, but to really be communicative and open as to where you're looking to get to, and what interests you, and then being pretty relentless and wanting to learn about it. And if you can become, kind of your, depends on team size, obviously, and things like that, but if you can kind of become your manager's kind of like trusted ally, or someone that, they're able to lean on a little bit more, that's a great way of kind of pulling yourself out of the crowd.
All right. Love it. Jack, we're almost at the end. Final question before we get to the quick fire round. Where does Jack Hobbs see himself in the next 5 and 10 years?
Oh, yeah. Look, within 5 years, I would like to, I was going to say expect, but I'm heavily motivated to be running a global customer success organization. Obviously, at the moment, we're focused on within EMEA, covering particular segments and products. I do want to get to the point of taking overall global control within a SaaS CSM, SaaS CS business. It's probably 5 years. Look, 10 years,
on the PGA Tour.
Yeah. Then I'm going to switch and be on the PGA Tour. No, look, I think 10 years, once I realized that there wasn't going to be the ability to be a professional athlete, I had always wanted to get to the point of being a CEO, and had kind of said I want to do it within a FTSE 100 business. Now that mindset has probably changed a little bit. What I really want to do within the next 10 years is take a company public, and successfully public. I think a lot of people celebrate, but then the bell rings and actually it's just another day, and you've now got external pressures to perform. So I'd love to get to the point where I can be, in the C-suite at a company that we've taken public, successfully public, and then see how we stay at the top. So quite a lot of work ahead of me.
Yeah, I love it.
A lot of shoveling shit, basically.
I love it, Jack.
Yeah.
This has been such a great conversation. A little quick fire round.
Sure.
Are we ready?
For some reason, I'm nervous.
There's nothing to be nervous
fine.
about. Work from home, work from the office.
Can I have both?
Yeah.
Fine.
Money or happiness?
I was going to say money and happy. I can't say both to everything. Of course, happiness.
Okay, like that. Favourite day of the week?
For some reason, Thursdays.
Yeah,
I love a Thursday.
Yeah. Wine night. Time in a group or time alone?
Probably overall time in a group.
Okay, like that. Would you rather travel to the past or future?
That's a really difficult one. I think maybe the past.
Okay, all right.
It seems like a simpler. Maybe it's just my nostalgia taking over.
Before technology.
Yeah.
Favourite book?
I don't know if I've got a favourite, because I will say I'm not particularly bookish, but what I will say, what I've been reading for about the last 5 years that I really need to finish is Barack Obama's first memoir.
Okay.
And find it fascinating. And I will say there is also a bit of a nostalgia in that, because even though he came into power at a time of kind of economic uncertainty, it was me becoming an adult and moving down to London, and the world seemed incredibly exciting, seemed easier than it is now. Also, it seemed a hell of a lot less pessimistic and hateful. Yeah. So I've got to say, when I'm reading it, as much as it's fascinating learning about him, I find it quite a nice trip down memory lane, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Who has it easier, men or women?
Who has it easier? Hey, man.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We had a guest.
I think if you said it the other way, you're on an iceberg trying to argue that one for quite a long time. Yeah, it's men.
Okay. Name a book you think everyone should read. I think you mentioned this earlier.
When Cultures Collide, 100%. And I think even if you're not in management, even if you're not in SaaS technology, I think it will give people a huge amount to learn from and help us understand people better. Which I think we need a lot of, considering what's going on in the world right now.
Very, very true.
Yeah.
Are you listening to any good podcasts?
Many good podcasts. Also, I've realised this is Quickfire, and I've made it not Quickfire. How many podcasts do you want?
No, top one.
It has to be Smartless.
Okay.
Which is Jason Bateman, Will Arnett.
I've heard of this one.
Yeah, and Sean Hayes.
Okay.
And they're just three best mates, obviously very famous. They get unbelievable celebs on every week. It's a surprise for two of them, and it's just a big interview, and it's typically hilarious. You learn a lot more, and it's just, again, it's something easy that takes my mind off work, so it's nice for the commute.
Nice. All right, Jack. Before we end, we do have a closing tradition on this podcast. So with everything we've discussed today, knowing what you know, what advice would you give your younger 16-year-old self, and would you still be doing the same thing?
So I think the biggest thing that I wish, going back to 16, is to actually have more confidence in myself and to back myself. It's big wide world is pretty scary, and I know that when I started my career, my only focus pretty much was to not get fired. I just wanted to find a company that people liked me. I produced a level of value. I didn't even know what that value was. I just wanted to be liked, basically. And so I do wish when I was 16, I had more confidence in myself. And as part of that, probably more conviction in my areas of interest at the time. And so that's probably wired.
Would you still be doing the same thing, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I think I would, actually. I think I would, which is probably pretty good, right?
Yeah, exactly. Not everyone is the same, but it's I like to ask the question because it's just a nice way to bring it back. We go from the dream at the start to, you've been through life. Would you still be doing the same thing, or do you want to pursue your dream?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so easy to always lose sight and just look at the bad and everything, or the stress and everything, but this might not have been in my original dream, but SaaS technology has given me a huge amount in life, whether it's prosperity, the ability to travel, to meet people, to develop myself. it's given me so much. So while it wasn't the original dream, I think I'm doing pretty well with it.
Yeah. If you can't be directly in the scrum, you could be on calls with scrum.
Oh yeah, exactly.
There you go.
I used to say actually, because when I was like, if I can't be an athlete, I still want to be behind the ropes, and that's kind of when I was thinking about working like the sports industry, and I do think that's a huge thing. I think like if you can find something around your passions, even if it's not what that initial dream was, I think it can sustain you. And maybe the only other thing I'll say there is I think people focus a little bit too much on dreams, on happiness, and they're constantly chasing that, and they don't really know actually what that is. I always remember my mum said to me, she was like, rather than chasing happiness, chase contentment. Be content in what you're doing, and that doesn't like dull your motivation or anything, but suddenly it means that you're not always longing for something more.
100%.
And I think that's been really helpful for me.
Yeah, I love it, Jack. And on that note, thank you so much.
Pleasure, mate.
For today. This has been great. You enjoyed it?
Mate, I've really enjoyed it. I don't even know time has flown.
Okay.
Mate, I've really enjoyed it, so thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
I hope it's been useful anyway.
It has. And, when I'm an international bestseller in 10 years' time, we'll run it back when you've rung the bell at your FTSE 100 company as part of the C-suite.
No pressure.
We'll say, look where we both got to, after all this time.
Yeah, and this will be the point where the ratings will spike. Right?
Yeah, we'll see.
Well, we'll see, won't we? Or it's going to have tanked and this will never go live. But yeah.
No, don't be silly. Right. If you've gotten to this point, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, share, comment. Tell us what you want to hear about next. Jack, once again, thank you. This has been another episode of What My Best Friend Does. If you didn't know, now you know. Over and out.